of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
One of America's top radio personalities, Jim Bohannon, brings his wit, wisdom, and natural charm to listeners on Guam. Voted one of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America, The Jim Bohannon Show brings listeners a unique blend of breaking news, interesting features, and informative reports on a spectrum of topics. The Jim Bohannon Show, Saturday through Monday from 6 to 9 p.m. and a Sunday morning bonus show from 6 to 9 a.m. Jim Bohannon on Guam's only news talk superstation, 93.3 The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Ordered to probe the origins of the pandemic. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden directing the intelligence community to redouble its efforts to find out how the coronavirus became a global killer and to report their findings by the end of the summer.
As we have done throughout our COVID response, we have been committed to a whole of government effort to ensure we're doing everything to both understand and end this pandemic and to prevent future pandemics.
White House Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says they'll continue to press China to be more transparent. The president's order prompting Facebook to make a change in its coronavirus posting policy.
It will no longer remove posts referencing the Wuhan lab leak theory. The tech giant's decision, coming after the Wall Street Journal's reporting, revealed that 3 scientists at the Wuhan lab were hospitalized in late 2019 after exhibiting symptoms associated with the coronavirus.
Fox's Kevin Cork. Police in Northern California say they still don't know what triggered a man to open fire on co-workers at a commuter rail facility in San Jose Wednesday morning. The outcome was deadly.
Authorities releasing the names of the 8 people who died. Their ages range from as young as 29 years old to 63. In addition to the 8 who were killed, a 9th person was wounded in the shooting and is still in critical condition.
Fox's Jeff Paul. Police say the gunman, 57-year-old Sam Cassidy, took his own life as they arrived. President Biden, in a statement, urging Congress to take up gun control legislation, a sentiment echoed by California's Governor Gavin Newsom. Texas police officers trying to help a man threatening to take his own life were met with a hail of bullets Wednesday evening in Flower Mound outside of Dallas. 3 of the officers were wounded, although none critically. Police returned fire, but say they've had no contact with the shooter since then. America is listening to Fox News.
Well, they say there are certain things that shouldn't be brought up at the kitchen table, but...
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Counteroffer Thursday to the president's latest infrastructure proposal.
With a deal they say reflects what President Biden agreed to in the Oval Office, $1 trillion over 8 years. And the GOP wants to pay for it in part with unspent COVID relief money. The lead GOP negotiator, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, says the White House hasn't rejected that idea, adding the administration has repurposed funds before to care for migrant children in HHS custody at the border. The final rounds of negotiations getting support from the GOP, but skepticism from Democrats. Moreover, there's broad suspicion among the GOP that progressives are threatening to pull their support if they don't get everything they want and would rather use reconciliation to push through a massive social spending bill without working across the aisle.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich. The president had set Memorial Day as his deadline for an infrastructure compromise. compromise. The Labor Department confirming what your wallet has probably already told you. Prices for almost everything are up.
Washington stimulus has been great for stock markets, but tough on consumers, touching budgets and wallets. And consumer prices, we saw that last month, growing at the fastest rate in 12 years. The CEO of the world's biggest bank, Jamie Dimon, says that Americans should brace for even much higher prices thanks to D.C. money printing.
As all that spending takes place, but yes, it will raise inflation. I think there was nothing wrong with 1.6%. You know, I would expect it to go considerably higher than that.
You're already seeing much more expensive prices. Used cars went up by the most since 1953 last month. Bacon prices were up 16%. And yes, meat lovers are shelling out more money.
Susan Lee of the Fox Business Network. Wall Street higher Wednesday. NASDAQ gaining 80 points. The Dow up 10. A federal lawsuit has been filed challenging West Virginia's new law banning transgendered athletes from competing in female scholastic sports. Filed on behalf of an 11-year-old student who says the law prevents her from competing in cross country. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. Go back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what I say every day. I'll probably keep on saying it every day because it's important. Okay, having paid sufficient deference to the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, I now move on to Zemi Ikotny. As usual, starting out with the Daily News, whose editorial today is titled, Pushing for Sustainable. Sustainable is another one of those lookout words. Not quite as bad as equity, inclusion, and diversity, but...
oh, you said sustainable. I'm going to listen.
You what?
I'm going to listen.
You're going to listen. Right, yeah. This sustainability is everything, right? Yeah, brand new recycling business will add to Guam's current efforts. The Guam Economic Development Authority said the government of Guam's efforts to diversify the island's economy could pay off soon, including a company that would improve sustainability efforts on island. The agency reported that 4 businesses have expressed interest in applying for a tax break, new businesses to start operating on Guam. We've received 4 letters of intent to apply since the start of the year from a manufacturer of medical equipment, a microbrewery, a solar farm, and a recycling company. GITA Board Vice Chair Ernesto June Espaldon said during Thursday's meeting. He said the recycling company's interest is significant because it's the first recycling business to apply for a certificate since the qualifying certificate law was changed in 1998 to give tax breaks for that industry. In December, the qualifying certificate requirements for recycling businesses were changed. Senators said the original law was too narrowly focused, which is why there was zero interest. And now our circular program will be evaluating one application less than 6 months after the bill's adoption. Espaldon said the company applying would like to divert waste generated by existing hotel and apartment buildings, as well as new construction projects, away from the landfill and toward various recycling efforts. Maybe you could take the garbage from the hotels and recycle it into new hotels. No, you can't do that. This would be a step forward for the island's sustainability. Any business that can remove a portion of what currently goes into the landfill provides a valuable service. It not only extends the life of the landfill, which will delay the need to expand it or build a new one, but material normally classified as, quote, trash will get repurposed or reused or recycled, which helps conserve resources. There's a strong push for Guam to be more sustainable. We see more organizations, companies, and individuals adopting and implementing sustainability measures. I practice sustainability here sometimes, Jose. Yeah, sometimes I'll use the same item on the card twice. Some are working to turn plastic normally tossed into the trash into items of use. Others have transitioned from polystyrene and other plastic food containers and tableware to biodegradable products. More people are gardening and composting. The growing shift to sustainability is overdue. We need to waste less, throw away less. We need to see beyond ease and convenience to provide a better future for coming generations. Let's all engage in sustainability. And the Daily News ran a column on the editorial page. It's actually, I suppose, it's more in the line of a letter to the editor from Laura Cepeda Nelson, who says, Guam's economy, like the rest of the world's, has been battling global effects of pandemic. Skipping on down to the meat here, Amanda Shelton introduced Bill 71 to aid women-owned businesses. This bill mirrors the U.S. Small Business Administration's federal set-aside for women-owned businesses with a 5% price advantage for local procurement. And of course, whenever I see this, I ask, who's going to pay for that? It affords local women-owned businesses more visibility and will allow these businesses to strive for equal economic footing in Guam's business community. You're not going to get equal economic footing if you get a 5% advantage, Laura. That's not what equal means. You're confusing the the critical Marxist word equity with equality. Now, here's the reason I put this on the agenda here. However, there is much data that still reflects the disparities for women-owned businesses, which is why this bill needs to be passed. In other words, you look at the results. That's where we come up with the term equity. So the women want not equality. They don't want to be treated like everybody else. They want equity. They want to get to the finish line, whether they're the fastest or not. And then the other reason I put this on the agenda is the final sentence. Bill 71 is a step in the right direction, and a progressive one at that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Finally.
I just found another reason not to like Bill 71.
Can't beat transparency.
Transparency, progressive. It's progressive, right? Yeah. Okay, so much for that.
It's interesting that letter juxtaposed to what we just heard from Fox News about the lawsuit of that transgender boy, girl, or who can't play in women's sports.
Yeah.
Because it's against the law.
Uh-huh.
Let's see what happens if we can play in women's business.
Yeah. Really. Yeah, and then yesterday there was a piece in the paper where Laura a couple of times said, we just want a level playing field with a 5% advantage for us. So our level playing field, the one we're going to have the race on, it's a football field. It's 100 yards long. But ours is 10 yards lower at the bottom than it is at the top. The level playing field. All right, then we go on to the Post. With the same failed strategy, meth dealing on Guam will not stop. And I just noticed this lady named Lovely was prosecuted for being probably the biggest meth dealer on the island. She was just sentenced here the other day. I don't think that she had a 5% set aside when she bought meth from her suppliers.
The bill hasn't passed yet.
Yeah, the bill hadn't passed, so it's okay. All right, here we go. Here's an interesting first sentence. Quote, "That's pretty ballsy." Looks like we're back to transgenders again. That's how the district court Chief Judge Francis Tydinkle Gatewood reacted when audio recordings were played in court in a hearing Tuesday about another alleged attempt to smuggle methamphetamine into the island's jail. A drug enforcement agency task force listened to calls between Daryl Jake Guerrero, 29, from a jail phone, and his associates outside the facility about allegedly bringing in meth into Hagatna Detention Facility. Guerrero's in jail waiting to be sentenced after he cut a plea deal in a meth dealing case involving 330 grams of meth, which the feds believe sold at street value between $60,000 and $90,000. Quote, "It's troubling, Your Honor," federal prosecutor Laura Sambataro said in the hearing, adding later, the factor that Mr. Guerrero got caught before with regard to bringing contraband in, and he's still doing it very close in time to his sentencing. Guerrero's sentence had to be delayed following the new information. Guam and federal law enforcers' efforts to stem the flow of drugs in Guam streets and even in prisoner jail compounds having been compromised by a system that needs to get better to deter repeat drug offenders, drug dealers. Now, this guy, Jake Guerrero, the story's not complete because it doesn't tell us whether or not he's going to get a job at the port after he gets out of jail. All right, here's the editorial. We as a community have also seen too many cases in which defendants get pretty lenient sentences by cutting deals, and at sentencing begging for leniency and crying out concerns over being separated from loved ones whose lives they have already destroyed, not to mention impassioned testimony from Angel Sablan, the executive director of the Mayor's Council. Guam's drug cases have been resolved, especially in local courts, in a way that has not deterred offenders from committing the same crime. It almost seems the offenders in general know the formula for gaming the justice system. The drug bust that involved several Department of Corrections officers a few years ago is a classic example, and bringing this up never gets old. Most of the former corrections officers who cut plea deals got away with a slap on the wrist sentences. Somehow they avoided having to spend significant time in prison or averted going to prison completely. Meth continues to flow in the streets, and people still attempt to smuggle it in to the island's prison and jail. And we see on a near daily basis meth-addicted Guamanians ruining their lives and those of their loved ones and committing crimes against innocent victims who happen to be in their way. We don't need to wonder why this continues to happen. We know why. The same approaches are applied again and again. Albert Einstein has been credited with saying the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. It doesn't take a genius to know the approaches to the problem fall exactly under that definition. But do we even want different results? Yeah, well, pretty good, Post.
That's why I support Resolution 56.
Resolution 56.
Because
If the insular cases were repealed, there'd be no more methamphetamine on this island.
Might as well add that.
Yep. No more rhinoceros beetles, no more brown tree snakes, no more stray dogs. Okay, I'm going to give the Post a blue star on this one today. Congratulations, Post. And take a look at the card. I've got Tall Tales versus Tina's Meth, plus Peter Watson, Krytarki, Grijalva, and Bavacqua, first on the card. And part of that is going to be a telephone conversation with Amata Coleman Radawagon, who we're expecting to call at 16:30 in about 8 more minutes. I've got the Attorney General versus Cover-Up, which has made the calendar previously, made the card previously as Steve versus Jerry Kitchen. I've got the Chinese American Civil Rights Coalition versus Turley and Tall Tales. Cultural Marxism versus the United States Navy and the Department of Agriculture. David Lebowski versus MDs and Bavacqua versus the CNMI. Well, I have to start out again with Tina's Myth, the insular cases. Once again, reminding you what Robert Lynn said. It's easier to believe the lie you've heard 1,000 times than the fact you just heard now. And that's where we are. The insular cases are racist. The insular cases, if the insular cases were overruled, all of our problems would be solved ipso facto. That's what we have to have. And of course, we got to talk about the SSI, Social Security income, and the Medicare cap, and some of the other, and federal highway funds, where Guam doesn't receive the same amount of federal largesse as states do. And in all the talk we've had about this, all of the hearings, all of the callers, all of the propaganda, no one up until now has ever mentioned this, that the reason that the United States advances when it defends on an equal protection basis the difference between what one of the states receives and what Guam receives is because Guam doesn't pay into the federal treasury. And we don't want to talk about that. We want to get something back, even though we don't pay anything in. Now, I could make arguments that, given our situation, we shouldn't have to pay in, but it's still something that needs to be addressed. And when it comes to an equal protection question, unless you're dealing with a suspect classification, living in a territory is not a suspect classification. Race, sex, some things like that are, but not living in a territory. If you're dealing with a suspect classification, then the court applies strict scrutiny to the difference in treatment between the two classes. And it's really, really hard to make it work with strict scrutiny. If it's not, if we're just talking about a regular scrutiny, normal scrutiny under the equal protection laws, then any legitimate purpose will pass constitutional muster. It doesn't even have to be the reason that the Congress passed the law. It doesn't even need to be the reason that even anybody thought of it. If counsel can come up with a reasonable state purpose to defend the disparate treatment between the two classes, it's not a violation of equal protection. So that's where we are today. Now, Tina, of course, testified before Grijalva's committee, and to Tello's credit, Tello got it. And on the debate, Tello said, you know, if what we're looking at is SSI and some of the things where we don't get the same amount as the states, that's what she should put in our resolution. We're putting too much in this resolution. So interestingly enough, the resolution as introduced was amended, and they adopted the amended version. And of course, nobody's seen the amended version except for me. And they added this paragraph at the end. Resolved that the Committee on Rules, etc., and the legislature hereby affirm the need for Congress to recognize that the provisions of the SSI statute that discriminate on the basis of status of resident of Guam are violative of the Constitution's guarantees of equal protection. Well, it's wrong on the law. It's just plain wrong on the law. But it's kind of like what Tello's saying. If you want the same amount of SSI, that should be your resolution. But, you know, they camouflaged it here. And, of course, as a matter of advocacy, I had to compliment Tina yesterday because no one really wanted to talk about the merits of the resolution. No one really wanted to talk about the fact that if Downs versus Bidwell were overruled and the United States Constitution applied to Guam of its own force, ex proprio vigere, we would be paying federal income tax instead of our own. We'd lose Section 30. We'd lose our duty-free status. We'd lose to qualify, on and on and on. Nobody wanted to talk about that because, yeah.
And that would include you as well, right? Paying for all of this.
Absolutely.
So it's not about race.
Say again?
So it's not about race.
No, it's not. It's not about race at all. That might be a mata. Okay, so here we go. You know, Amata, I was in American Samoa in 1965, and I only learned 3 phrases, one of which was talofa.
Talofa, Bob.
Uh-huh.
That's a good one to learn.
It is. And the second one I learned was tofat, which is also important, right?
Right.
And most important, Fia Inu Pia.
That is important.
Yeah,
that's the top priority one.
Yeah, that got me through. So, welcome to Tall Tales, Amata.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
And I was just talking about Resolution 56, which I'm sure you're quite familiar with, correct?
Yes.
Our local resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that it is asking that the House Subcommittee on Territories pass their Resolution 279, which I've talked about extensively.
Yes.
From the standpoint of if Downs versus Bidwell is overruled, the Constitution applies to the 5 insular territories of its own force, and things like self-determination, et cetera, are gone, and paying federal income tax arrive. And I think that the most egregious aspect of that would be for American Samoa. So you might want to enlighten our audience here about the effect of that on both folks in American Samoa.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for letting me be on your show here. You know, I had a couple of thoughts with regard to the Guam resolution, and it cites the use of the words savages and peonage in SCOTUS opinions and Navy documents as examples of racist words and practices that justify rejection of reliance on such SCOTUS opinions. But both those same terms are used on the SCOTUS opinion in Wong Kim Ark, including quotes cited favorably in Wong Kim Ark ruling from other SCOTUS opinions. I mean, why is it demanded that insular cases cannot be used because of racism, but equally American relies on Wong Kim Ark in the Fichise Manu case, even though it has equally offensive racial content? And I think the fact that Wong Kim Ark did not deny U.S. citizenship clearly acquired by birth in a state, it doesn't matter. But Wong Kim Ark upheld the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is far more racist, it seems to me, than the insular cases. But I do appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our concerns with the tinkering with the insular cases. I just got in from Hawaii, as a matter of fact, today, where I spent the last 3 days with meetings and stuff. And first, I want to explode one myth that's being perpetuated by some special interest groups. American Samoans are U.S. nationals, but that does not make us U.S. second-class citizens. Anyone born on U.S. soil is an American, but Americans come in 2 categories. You're either a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national. And being a U.S. citizen does not give a Guamanian any more rights or privileges than a Samoan. I mean, if a Samoan moved here or the States and wanted to vote or get a government job that requires citizenship for national security, there's a simple procedure for doing that. And I also have introduced a bill in the U.S. House that would even simplify that further. But what's happened is that a special interest group looking for national voting rights for people in the territories have taken it upon themselves to find some Samoans who live in the states to sue the federal government to make them citizens automatically. I mean, we are nationals by virtue of congressional legislation, and Guamanians are U.S. citizens also by legislation. So the special interests are hoping the court will make everyone citizen by virtue of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And then once the court does that, they can come back and say that under the equal protection provision, all citizens in the territories would then have to vote for president. The problem is that we in American Samoa, we like being nationals because the U.S. Constitution does not fully apply to us in our territory. And no one by virtue of having U.S. citizenship can sort of come in and buy land in American Samoa. We have communal land ownership. We don't have much land anyway, and we're pretty stingy about it. And anyway, we want to keep it that way. I don't know. I think the problem for Guam is that if the court declares us citizens, they would rob us of our ability to make that determination for ourselves. And the promise of self-determination is sacred to us. It's a promise the United States made when we agreed to U.S. sovereignty 121 years ago. And, you know, unlike any other territory, outsiders cannot come in and buy land or even establish residence with government permission. We control our own borders, our own immigration, our own customs system, and even our legislature, in part, is selected by customary means, not direct election, and that would be the Senate side. But most importantly, we were not acquired by the U.S. as spoils of war or purchased from some European or Asian power. So we have a completely different history from our sister territories. The framework of our constitutional relationship with the U.S. is embodied in the insular cases. And if those cases were voided without Congress establishing another framework at the same time, I think the tenets of our relationship would be vulnerable to challenge. And if our status as nationals could be changed by the court, couldn't they also do away with our land tenure system, bring our borders under federal control, allow non-Samoans to live in American Samoa, and change the way we elect our Senate? And if they could take away our self-determination, the precedent would be established to do the same thing in Guam. I mean, you know, a Guamanian recently told me the reason they want the legislature to endorse the Grijalva resolution is to make it easier for Guam to be eligible for SSI. But, you know, enactment of the Grijalva resolution is not necessary for that. Eligibility for any federal program equal to what states gets is merely a matter of Congress passing a law making it so. And the trade-off for surrendering self-determination is too great. This is why I cannot support the Grijalva resolution and would urge the Guam legislature to look hard before taking that leap. I do support the resolution's condemnation of the racist language, absolutely, that was used by justices in their opinions back in the day. But the resolution, at the same time, it must call for not relying on the insular cases in the future, only once Congress has enacted legislation to replace the framework for constitutional arrangements for the territories. I think the resolution also should call for Congress to give full equality to territories for all programs for which states are eligible. And I really think that's overdue. And my colleagues and I from the territories, we're pushing that. But with those changes, I'd be happy to support the resolution. I'd like to be able to support Chairman Grijalva's resolution, and I will be proposing language when the resolution comes before the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. And so, you know, that's kind of where we are on that score.
Well, very well put, Amata. I think anyone who's listening could not help but understand exactly what your situation is. I'd want to just make a couple of comments here. If Downs were overruled and the Constitution applied of its own force, it would be like a fish trap. We would swim into being an incorporated territory, but we could never swim out. The only way out of being an incorporated territory is to become a state, and I don't think that's going to happen to Samoa or Guam. The second,
yes, I agree.
The second thing was that, as I recall, you were able to get the Congress to pass a statute that makes naturalization quick and easy for folks from Samoa residing in the mainland. Isn't that correct?
Well, we've introduced it. It's making its way through the process, and interesting that just that term naturalization is probably not really accurate because, and yet the federal government has had it in their statutes all this time. But we are not trying to get U.S. nationals naturalized, at least those who want to become U.S. citizens. We're trying to, it's more of a reclassification.
Okay.
Because U.S. nationals are already Americans. Naturalization is the process that aliens use to become U.S. citizens.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, at any rate, I feel very good about the prospects of the bill. It's really a very, very simple bill that I have. And again, many of our American Samoans prefer to remain as U.S. nationals. I happen to be a U.S. citizen myself, but many do think it's good for them to stay as U.S. nationals, and many of them are the ones who live down in American Samoa, become heavily involved in the traditional customs. I am too. I'm heavily involved in the traditional customs. I'm a high chief in American Samoa, which there are very few women who achieve that status. But at any rate, that's where we are on that.
That's interesting, Amata. Amata, you're not a stranger to Guam either, are you?
Oh my gosh, no. Guam is, I consider Guam my second home. And as a matter of fact, a few years ago when Dr. Robert Underwood invited me to come and deliver a lecture for the presidential lecture series, I just jumped at the chance because it was a chance to come back to Guam. And, so he then asked me if I had a title for my lecture. And I said, yes. My road to Congress runs through Guam. And so, back in the days when I think the McDonald's was the largest in the world or something like, it's been a few years now. When I went to the University of Guam, I think it was College of Guam, they still had some Quonset huts there. And I enjoyed my time there very much. I've been able to get back there in the last several years on a couple of congressional delegation trips, and so I look for every opportunity to try to make it back to my second home there.
So you're a UOG graduate, correct, Amata?
I am, and as a matter of fact, I was the only UOG graduate in Congress ever, which is interesting. And then when Mike Tan Nicholas came along, he's also a graduate of the University of Guam. So it's just the two of us.
A natural choice. And you have spent some time in at least Saipan because your father was a deputy high commissioner of the Trust Territory and then was a district administrator in several districts in the Trust Territory also, correct?
Yes. I spent quite a bit of time there, as well as the Marshall Islands. And you make friends, you learn the languages, and it's a very important part of my life and fond memories that I have of that area. But when he finished his first term as governor of American Samoa, President Eisenhower, it was the end of his term. And then when President Kennedy came in, he decided to send my father to the Marshall Islands. And of course, nobody knew where the Marshall Islands was. We knew very little about it. I was a very little girl then. And so he left the governorship to become the chief executive of the Marshall Islands. And, well, I do have 10 brothers. The boys all stayed, and they went to school there in Madrigal. And then my parents thought it best to send me to school in Honolulu, where we had family. So for the next 4 years, I attended Sacred Hearts Academy in Kaimiki, and I lived in a convent where my dad's sister was a semi-cloistered nun. And but the Marshall Islands was my first introduction to Micronesia. And the next stop on my road to Guam. And then as I was finishing high school, my parents were asked to come to Saipan, where Dad became the chief executive of the Northern Marianas, which today is known as governor, and the chief executive of the Marshall Islands in those days, of course, today is known as president. But I first set foot on Guam while I was en route to Saipan. And once again, there being no college at all in American Samoa, that is the reason why I was encouraged to go to school, go to college off island. And I mean, I could have gone to the University of Hawaii, but I think my parents felt that they wanted to broaden my horizons and keep me from spending too much time on the beach. But one of the reasons I was attracted to Los Angeles, I ultimately went to Loyola Marymount, was that we also had relatives there. And so just as I had gone home to Madro every summer from school in Honolulu, while I was at college in Los Angeles, I also went home every summer. And while I was there, I got a job in Saipan, working for the Peace Corps Micronesia. And at that time, it was the first time they were bringing Peace Corps trainees to learn the language in country. So I was a staff assistant to the languages coordinator, and the whole program was set up at Hopwood High School. So these are really very fond memories. And but still in all, when you go away to school like that, you know, and you really, I never really wanted to go away to school. I wanted to be where my parents were, you know, and I think it was not the easiest thing to get adjusted like that when you're fresh off the boat, as it were. And so while I was still there in Los Angeles, it just seemed that I needed to go back home to the islands. And by then, the College of Guam had become the University of Guam. And so I enrolled. And when I first got there, I actually went and stayed at the Micronesia Hotel. But I couldn't study because it was so loud, people drinking all night long, and the music so loud, I just couldn't get anything done. But the president of the University of Guam, I'll never forget, Dr. Antonio Yamashita and his wife, you know, they were happy to give me a room in their home. So I just can't thank the Yamashitas enough for their kindness and understanding. And if Mrs. Lorraine Yamashita is listening, thank you from the bottom of my heart. But they just were so nice to me. Many times I get out of my last class and I go to their home way after dinner, and even though the family might have gone off to bed, Mrs. Yamashita, she always left dinner in the oven for me, and I especially loved the beef steak. So, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today without the help of this very kind family. And so when I talked to Dr. Robert Underwood, he told me that Mrs. Yamashita is still with us. And so I was able to see her for a little while when I was there delivering this lecture. So it's such a thrill, I just had no idea. And but I can tell you that it's my year that I spent at the University of Guam, as far as my college years, that is the time that I truly enjoyed and that I really care about. And, you know, I was sorry to leave at the time. Guam was on the verge of a new chapter in its history, and a year later they elected their own governor and member of Congress. And the previous summer, when I was home on Saipan, I met a young man who was part of a White House National Security Task Force doing a survey of the economic development of the islands. And when he came to Saipan, we would get together and drink coffee and talk. And so in 1970, when Antonio Wonpat came to Congress, although I was 3 credits short, I couldn't resist the urge to take a job I'd been offered in Washington, D.C. So the young man who later became my husband, he would also come through Guam, too, as kind of part of his job. But at that same time, American Samoa elected its own delegate at large to Washington, and I went to work for him, Paramount Chief Fuimono. He was looking for somebody who was fluent in both cultures, could speak English and then deal with the Samoan-speaking constituents when they came to town. So one of the things I did way back then was to join the Guam Society of America in Washington, D.C. And now, my God, I think it's more than 50 years now that Fred and I have been members of the Guam Society of America. And we look forward to that every year, especially the Christmas party. But they always have the best Chamorro food. And that's always something that attracts people to come. So my oldest and longest friends, they came from Guam, you know. And actually, there was no American Samoa Society until much, much later. But the Guam Society was already organized, and so I became an active participant over those many years. And I went on to work with for the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. American Samoa decided to elect its own governor, and I don't want to talk your ear off, but then another opportunity came back to me to go to Guam and Saipan. So I'm always looking for reasons to come to Guam, and so I'm not surprised to see how much progress has been made in Guam, because it really, Guam occupies a special place in my heart.
Well, that's very interesting, Amata. We're going to have to take a break here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts.
Not quite yet,
Thank
Jose.
you.
Yeah, and you've established your street cred here. You're not a stranger to Guam, so is there something you'd like to tell Tina Rose Munya Barnes and the 36th Guam legislature about their resolutions? Something like maybe don't pass it?
Well, yes, I think they're on the right track. But just to keep it simple, I really just think that what you want to do is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Condemn the racist part of this resolution. I mean, the insular cases, but do not throw the entire framework out until such time that Congress has replaced it with something else. Because if you throw it out, it will not only be detrimental to American Samoa, but I do believe that it may become detrimental to Guam down the road sometime in the future. But I wish her the very best. I consider her a friend. She did such a great job when she testified during the hearing we had on May 12th here in Washington. And I want to thank you again, Bob, very much for giving me this opportunity.
It's really great talking.
Take care.
Really great talking with you, Amata. And until next time, I'll just have to say, tofa.
Sisu Smahasi. Take care.
Goodbye. Yeah, okay, let's take a short break here.
dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified, serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, here we are. We got about 5 minutes before the big halftime show here. I'm just going to do a little recap on my chat with Amata Coleman Radewagen, the delegate from American Samoa to the United States Congress, who echoed some of the things that I've been preaching about here for quite some time, and that being that the overruling of Downs versus Bidwell would be, as far as Samoa is concerned, very, very unfavorable. Amata mentioned the Supreme Court case called Wong R. Kim, United States versus Wong R. Kim, who was the child of 2 Chinese, brace yourself now, fasten your seatbelts, 2 Chinese aliens. Wow. Do I have to wash my mouth out with soap? They were living in San Francisco, and it was an immigration matter, and the Supreme Court ruled that Wong R. Kim fell under the first sentence of the 14th Amendment, which reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States in no state and of the state wherein they reside. So even though Wong R. Kim's parents were aliens and would not be able to come back to the United States if they ever left because of the Chinese exclusion law, the fact that he was born in the United States made him a United States citizen. Amata had a good point about American people from American Samoa and naturalization. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says Congress shall establish a uniform law for naturalization, but people who would be naturalized are people who are not United citizens, foreigners, aliens. And as she so clearly pointed out, people born in American Samoa are Americans. They are American nationals. So she said it's more of her bill is more of a reclassification than naturalization. So, one would think that listening to the delegate from the territory of Samoa, who is totally familiar with the Marianas, Guam, Saipan, etc., articulate, really understands this whole thing when she says, no, overruling the Insular case is not a good thing to do. I mean, you could kind of ignore what I say. That's pretty easy. A lot of people do it, but to ignore what Amata just said, I mean, that takes a lot of switching languages here, a lot of chutzpah. Okay, so very nice that Amata could find, and it's late. She's calling from Honolulu. She's up really late at night. Thank you very much, Amata. Okay, so just about time for the big halftime show, and from there we're going to go to Jerry Kitchen. Am I too early for the halftime show, Jose?
Got a couple of seconds left.
A couple of seconds left before we get to Jerry Kitchen, which is now open again, according to the story I just did a couple days ago. And he only opened, he had 2 stalls in that building, in that strip mall. He'd only opened one, and my analysis was it would make it harder for errant drivers to run into his drive into his restaurant. So here we go on the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Calling again for gun control legislation. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Because every life that is taken by a bullet pierces the soul of the nation. President Biden's reaction to the workplace shooting Wednesday in San Jose, California, that left 8 people dead.
The shooter has been named as 57-year-old Samuel Cassidy. We do know that he was an employee of the Valley Transportation Authority. We do know that all of the 8 people he shot dead were also employees of the VTA. Now, no officials are confirming anything about why Mr. Cassidy may have carried out these horrific shootings.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt. Police say Cassidy fired a final shot to take his own life as they approached him. 3 police officers have been shot in a town northwest of Dallas.
Flower Mound PD got a 911 call about a suicidal person at a home. They set up a perimeter, tried to make contact with him. This man fired a weapon at 3 officers through the front door. 2 of them were taken to the hospital. Both are stable. The other was treated here on the scene and released.
Reporter Macy Jenkins of Fox 4 in Dallas says police returned fire, but at last report they've not made further contact with the man. President Biden ordering the intelligence community to find out how the coronavirus started.
2 theories exist: a laboratory mishap or human contact with an animal that was infected. Given that, Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says nearly 600,000 Americans dead of COVID demands an answer.
We have to get a better sense of the origin of COVID-19 and also how do we prevent the next pandemic.
He wants American labs to be part of the 90-day investigation and has urged transparency from China, which is up to now not allowed U.S. investigators on the ground.
Fox's Gernal Scott, China's U.S. embassy, saying in a statement politicizing the origins would hamper investigations. America is listening to Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Federal agents say they've broken up a massive international drug operation.
Federal and state law enforcement officials say an investigation that began in 2017 into a drug trafficking network that shipped drugs from Mexico's Sinaloa cartel to organizations around the nation's capital has resulted in multiple convictions. The investigation covered 7 states, resulting in more than 30 arrests, the seizure of guns, jewelry, and millions in cash, along with hundreds of pounds of drugs, including methamphetamine, fentanyl, and cocaine. Authorities say at least 7 drug dealing organizations in or around the nation's capital were dismantled during the operation. Rich Dennison, Fox News.
Another mayoral candidate in north central Mexico has been killed ahead of the June 6th election. That makes 34 candidates murdered. President Lopez Obrador says it is without doubt the work of organized crime gangs. Attorney and Harvard Law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz is suing Netflix for $80 million over its portrayal of him in a series about sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Dershowitz says Netflix defamed him by falsely claiming that he'd had sex with one of Epstein's victims. 2 children's book authors have died. Lois Ellertz, who authored books including Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, has died at the age of 86, and Eric Carle has passed as well.
Eric Carle helped entertain millions of kids with books like The Very Busy Spider, The Very Quiet Cricket, and his classic The Very Hungry Caterpillar. A video put out by Puffin Books in 2012 has over 3 million views of Carle reading.
One Sunday morning, the warm sun came up, and pop, out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar.
That book sold over 40 million copies. Carle once said the unknown often brings fear with it. In my books, I try to counteract this fear, to replace it with a positive message. His family says he died at the age of 91 in his Massachusetts studio. Jill Nato, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Off a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Chili's is bringing you a full meal offer with 3 for Me for just $15. You get a beverage, a starter, and an entree. First, choose from a refreshing Coca-Cola or iced tea, pick a starter, then select your choice of a mouth-watering entree, like Cajun pasta with grilled chicken, ranchero chicken tacos, or the savory Santa Fe burger. Dine in today or visit chilisguam.com for delivery and to-go options. Chili's, 3 for Me for just $15. Available for a limited time. Chili's, savor the moment.
So here we are back on Tall Tales after the big halftime show. Heading into the second half of Tall Tales. And the next item on the card is the Attorney General versus Cover Up. And I have an article that ran yesterday. Attorney General Levin Camacho at 8 a.m. today brought criminal charges against the driver of the red Jeep that plowed into Jerry Kitchen the morning of February 26, according to Chief of Police Steve Ignacio. Ignacio said that if the magistrate judge finds the AG's complaint sufficient with probable cause, a summons will be issued for the driver to answer at least a driving while intoxicated misdemeanor charge. Now, I've got another article here. AG files criminal complaint in crash at Jerry Kitchen. But before I get there, I do want to mention, Steve Ignacio is the talk show host, Full Employment Act of 2021. He has done so many things, from the time that I asked him, when he came public and said, well, somebody tried to steal my motorcycle, so I had the nearest precinct do patrol checks on my house, all in the name of fairness, equity, serving the public, etc. And he has fumbled every ball that's been tossed at him, from everything from a basketball to a ping pong ball. He's fumbled it every single time.
Are you saying that he's offered material consistently from the get-go?
Absolutely. So after the red Jeep made the interesting entry into Jerry Kitchen, everybody was saying, what in the world is going on here? That car must have been going like a bat out of hell. It crossed the lane, jumped a curb, and drove all the way to the back wall of Jerry Kitchen. And we were told that the driver was cited for imprudent driving. And
nope.
And reporters asked Steve, what's going on, Steve? And Steve's, well, I've reviewed that matter, and everything was done according to procedures. Nothing wrong here.
Nope.
And when it turned out that a police officer was a passenger in the car, and that no serious and no field sobriety test or field breathalyzer test was conducted, the word cover-up was on everybody's lips. How could this possibly be? And that's when Steve immortalized himself in the annals of Tall Tales with his statement, I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this crash. He closed his investigation. And because people like me kept jabbering about it, it was decided, well, let's let the AG, the Attorney General, well, wait a minute. And Steve said, we'll reinvestigate it. Still nothing. Still more jabbering. And then the decision was made, well, let's let the Attorney General take a crack at it. And what do you think happened? A person named, what's her first name here? Nikita Uggan was arrested for what amounted to driving while intoxicated. And then when we look at the newspaper reports, the magistrate's reports, some stuff that Troy dug up, you got to ask yourself, what in the world, what kind of police department do we have here? Now, according to the reports, Nikita Uggan was not just drunk. She was what we would refer to as drunk on her doggin, or falling down drunk, or help me out here, some callers. Tell me other descriptive terms for being so drunk she couldn't find her. She's so drunk she couldn't find her butt with a 6-man working party. all those kinds of things. After she was removed from Jerry Kitchen, she couldn't tell the person. She'd obviously called someone, or someone had been called to pick them up because, another thing, they tried to drive the car away from Jerry Kitchen, but one of the wheels was broken, so it couldn't be driven. So they had to wait for a while for her to sober up because she couldn't tell the driver where she lived. She when they got her back down to the venue, she threw up, on and on and on. They'd had 7 shots of tequila between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. Even someone of my bulk, 7 shots of tequila in 4 hours, I don't think I'd want to be driving. And I suspect that Nikita is not as big as I am. Smaller you are, the less alcohol it takes, right? So when the cop, Officer Champion, showed up here, this is the scene that I imagine. There are four drunken women about 30 years old, wondering, what in the world are we going to do now? Right? They're very confused, very drunk, probably very disheveled. And the officer finds out who is driving. She probably can't even stand up without help at this time. And based on his training and experience, he decided that there was no need to suspect that she might be under the influence of alcohol or some other drug.
She found her champion.
So the Attorney General has brought criminal charges against one person. Is that enough? Steve also announced that finally he's going to start an internal affairs investigation. Of course, causing me to wonder, didn't the clock start to run? You know, when Officer Champion did his investigation, shouldn't management have known at that time? Oh, something else. The Attorney General was able to get the video footage from neighboring businesses, so we actually could see what happened. Steve and Champion were both cast in Sherlock Holmes' story, The Silver Blade. It wasn't what they did, Jose.
It's what they didn't do.
It's what they didn't do. They didn't do anything at all. They just walk around and, I mean, if this kind of police work is tolerated, then we might as well post a sign at our airport that said, "Welcome to Guam. Criminals welcome." You know, we don't enforce the law here. This was so bad. One of the key elements here that somehow the Attorney General was able to stumble on, he found a confidential informant, the person that picked the women up, who laid out some really interesting facts. And he found out that they'd been drinking at the venue, got a search warrant, got the video from the venue, and there's some really incriminating evidence there. Now, this morning on the Ray Gibson show, there was some talk about, well, you know, if is that legal? Is that legal to have a video camera in a bar and give that to the police? And what about privacy? Well, I've got a little lesson here on privacy, the law of privacy. If we can have the Law and Order notebooks, Jose. So as far as the law of privacy is concerned, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different titles under the law of privacy, and none of them mean what you think it means. The first violation of privacy would be the appropriation of a name or likeness. So let's say that I were down at the venue drinking a non-alcoholic beer, and they captured me on video, and then they did this TV ad showing, you know, that one about the most interesting man in the world?
That's you.
Yeah, it'd be kind of like that, except it'd be my pictures.
But from a security camera.
Yeah, that they cobbed off from the security. Oh, the most interesting man on Guam comes to the venue. You should too. Now, if they didn't have my permission to do that, that would be the appropriation of a name or likeness. That would be an invasion of my privacy. I'd probably do it if they'd pay me enough. But, okay, another invasion of privacy is intrusion upon seclusion. Seclusion laws protect your right to privacy while you are in solitude or seclusion. This extends to you or your private affairs. For example, it's an invasion of privacy for a neighbor to peek through your windows or take pictures of you in your home. Likewise, an invasion of privacy to use electronic equipment to eavesdrop. So this is probably what most people think of when they think of an invasion of privacy. And I sent Ray a note when he was talking about this, that there's a well-established principle of law. The policeman's eye commits no trespass. If a policeman is in a place where he has a legal right to be, whatever he sees is fair game. It's open season. So if he's not in a place that he has the right to be, that's a little different. Now, the leading case here deals with what's called an expectation of privacy. In order to have your privacy violated, there must be a reasonable expectation of privacy. And the case that decided that was called Katz versus the United States, and it occurred back in the days when we had telephone booths, which an awful lot of people wouldn't know what I'm talking about.
That's why we don't see Superman anymore.
Exactly. He has no place to change. Yeah. So it's illegal to put a microphone in a place where someone is going to be talking on the phone or something like that, because he has a reasonable expectation of privacy. The only way you can tap a telephone conversation is with a search warrant. So they figured out some way that technologically quite some time ago of focusing a device on the glass on the outside of the window of the telephone booth, and they could pick up the sound that way. And the United States Supreme Court, in a well-remembered one-liner, found that was an illegal seizure, illegal search, because the Fourth Amendment protects people, not places. And here's what the Fourth Amendment says. The right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So that was a bad search. So the other kinds of invasions of privacy, you got false light, public disclosure of private facts, etc. But I won't go into those. I'll just stick with the example here at the venue. So is the venue a public place? Yes. Does a person in a public place have a reasonable expectation of privacy? No. Would catching a person on video surveillance cameras constitute an invasion of privacy? No. Would it be necessary for the bar owner to have a big red arrow pointing to the camera saying, look, mind your P's and Q's down there, you guys?
Nope.
You're on video camera? No. Not necessary. You're in a public place. You have no reasonable expectation of privacy. Could the owner of that bar give that video to somebody else? More than likely, unless the person that gets the video uses to put the person in the film in a false light, or there's a public disclosure of private facts, which is pretty hard to come by in that situation. So if you go to the venue and you have 7 shots of tequila, and you're in video camp, you've been videoed, don't be surprised when that turns up as evidence against you if you decide to take this case to trial, which I sincerely doubt. Okay, well then what about the bar owner giving the video to the cops? Well, Fourth Amendment once again. The bar owner can say, no, I don't want to give that to you. Now, if it's law and order, then the two cops from law and order say, well, this is important for a restaurant invasion, and if you don't want to give it to us, I noticed that your liquor license is out of date, and, maybe the public health people ought to come in. That's on law and order. But the bar owner could say, no, I'm not going to give it to you. And as in this case, then the cops go before a judge. The judge issues a warrant, search warrant, and away you go. And it is now part of the evidence in that criminal case. I would conjecture that if the case went to trial and the defendant, Miss Uggan, moved to suppress that evidence, the motion to suppress would be denied, because you don't have much of a right to privacy in a public place. You gotta have that reasonable expectation of privacy. Okay, I got R. Carl on the line, who probably wants to tell us about the time that he saw himself on a video taken at the venue, right, R. Carl?
I can't say that. I've never been.
Actually, he's probably going to be kvetching a little bit about my using that commercial with myself as the most interesting man on the island when everybody knows it's you, right, Carl?
No, Bob, you're the most interesting man on Guam. And I will say that you are the most dangerous man in any room.
I'll take it.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. How does Project Veritas do what they do, with the hidden cameras and catching employees of CNN and other media outlets making embarrassing statements? How do they not get sued? That is in New York City, I think. So that would be, I think New York is pretty blue.
If I were a newspaper reporter and I said, Carl, I want to, wait a minute, I'll take the Project Veritas. That was not, the person didn't identify herself as a reporter. The guy is trying to put the moves on the lady, right? Does the guy have a reasonable expectation of privacy when he's doing that? I don't think so. Remember, he was bragging. I'm from CNN, and we did this, and we did that. And so I don't think he has that reasonable expectation of privacy.
Oh, okay.
And that's,
so it would be unlike maybe it was a business meeting or something like that.
Say again?
It would be different if it was a business meeting, maybe, right?
Well, if we're talking about trade secrets or something like that, possibly, yeah. Now, there is one other matter that I have to discuss, and that's this guy named David DeLayden, who did this, who infiltrated the abortion industry in California and made videos of these abortionists at Planned Parenthood in a sting, selling him baby parts of aborted fetuses and babies. And, of course, talk about blue. Our vice president got involved in the prosecution of DeLayden, criminal and civil. And I haven't been able to read enough about that to know exactly how that turned. Now, if a state has a statute on privacy, that changes it all. And a well-drafted statute might even go so far as to protect you at the venue if it's properly drafted. So I hope that answers your question, Carl.
I've just got one more scenario, and it's also about Project Veritas. Someone within the CNN staff was listening in on the head of CNN, his daily or weekly message to the team, and he recorded that and he released it to the head of Project Veritas, and Veritas releases to the public. There's no expectation of privacy and a message from the boss.
Well, the boss might have a claim against the leaker, but again, it would depend on the company policy and the particulars of the meeting. Now, one would think that a company like that would have a company policy that says what goes down at CNN stays at CNN, but in the absence of a company policy or even an oral instruction at the beginning of the meeting, then it gets a little bit dicey. But the violator is the leaker, not the leakee.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, well, that makes it a little clearer. Okay, well, thanks, Bob, for your comments. I appreciate it.
All right, good talking to you, Carl. Okay, we're going to head for Chicago for the seventh inning stretch. We're going to go from Wrigley Field in Chicago straight to Paris.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tucumán has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago for the seventh inning stretch, and I'm going to go from Chicago to Paris and chat with our old friend Frenchie. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Yeah, that story about expected privacy is kind of funny. This morning I was listening to Ray as well, and I was laughing. He's probably worried about all the places he goes out for a drink. But most public places of that kind, like bars, restaurants, even convention centers, you will be surprised, you have security cameras. And most people actually post it. Now, I will grant you that it's posted in places where most people don't look, at the entrance next to the Better Business Bureau logo. You might have a sign that says these premises are under video surveillance. If you go to your supermarket, at Macy's, all those places, they have those little signs here and there, and most people don't pay attention to that. But it is as you say, it's a public place. You don't have that much claim for privacy in a public place. So I was kind of laughing this morning, hearing Ray getting suddenly concerned about what might show up on video. So, but otherwise, I don't think a divorce attorney could request tapes from a bar or anything like that. I mean, you can probably tell us more.
I think he could with a subpoena.
Yeah, you could. Huh?
Yeah.
You would have to have a
Subpoena.
specific subpoena. Yeah. Oh well. And then the other thing, of course, is like for example, even in convention center or in hotel banquet rooms, a lot of time people don't know there are security cameras, which makes sense nowadays. There are so many breaking, pilferage, and all kind of things. And actually, if you read carefully your catering contract, a lot of times they would say, and they do sometimes have requests for it, for example, for political meetings or trade meetings. And that's where I'm going to come back to the Delaney story. What happened is that there would be a request from the person that makes the booking that all security cameras and sound system must be turned off during the event because there will be exchange of trade secrets or things like this. And the hotel then will have to make sure, or the convention venue would have to make sure that those things are switched off. But this is, a lot of time, it's in small print at the bottom of your a 3-page catering contract, but it is there. And, a lot of those places belong to large hotel chains or consortium, and the lawyers have done their job there, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. The Delaney story in California, what is very interesting is that he actually got his information during a convention in a convention area where people, in order to sign in, had to pledge that they would not tape or film any of the displays, conversations, and so on. And even though many lawyers have opinionated that this kind of exclusion was very sketchy in the way it was drafted by the convention, Kamala Harris sided with the group that organized that convention, and like you said, went first civil and then criminal. And then the latest I read about it, they even are asking him for legal fees. So they're really trying to terrorize people from taping those things. I know that Project Veritas is being very careful, and a lot of times they are not doing the taping themselves. It is what you call a whistleblower of sort that brings in things that they've been privy to, and a lot of time Project Veritas is just relaying something that they didn't tape themselves, even though they do investigative journalism with hidden mics and hidden cameras. So that was my little contribution today for that.
Well, I appreciate that, Frenchie. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, I've been watching the Delaney thing because I think it probably will be overturned on appeal and everything. But in the meantime, the guy has been going through 3 to 4 years of legal hell, and they are really trying to terrorize people from bringing the truth out.
Classic case of the chilling effect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frenchie. All right. So, privacy. The whole idea of privacy, I think, is a relatively new one. I don't remember, 40 years ago, people talking about, well, it was invading my privacy or something. And of course, the word does not appear in this document even once, the word privacy.
Well, nothing says privacy like running your Jeep through a plate glass window.
True enough. And I remember that once upon a time, in Las Vegas, talk about surveillance. Of course, in Las Vegas, all of the surveillance cameras, the so-called eyes in the skies, are to keep track of the employees, to see the employees aren't stealing from the casino. And I understand that it hasn't been that long ago that before we had the technology we have now, that the ceilings in all of the casinos there were catwalks above the ceilings. And the employees would walk around in these catwalks and get down their hands and knees and look through holes in the ceiling to do their surveillance. So nothing new, and nothing that I don't think I'm really that concerned about someone invading my privacy. Now, if someone came along and tried to take a picture through the window of my house, that's a little different. And of course, we had a guy who got busted here not too long ago because he rigged up a camera on a stick and stuck it underneath the wall in a public restroom and shot some film on the other side of the wall. When you're in the toilet, you probably got a reasonable expectation of privacy. Okay, next item on the card, I'm going to go skip ahead a little bit because of the remaining time. I've got GMH versus David Lebowski. And David Lebowski suffered a great tragedy. His 4-year-old son died in the hospital. David claims that no doctor would come and attend to him as David watched him dying overnight. And David has now taken on a crusade to have our mandatory medical malpractice statute either repealed legislatively or judicially. I think it's probably going to have to be legislation, because as it is now, in order to sue a doctor for malpractice, you have to go through the mandatory medical malpractice arbitration law, which is going to cost you $50,000 or $100,000. And when you're finished, all you've won is the right to sue, to go to court. It's a screening process. So there's been talk amongst lay people like David Lebowski, who wind up on the wrong end of this, about repealing it. But guess what? The medical establishment is against it.
You don't say.
Yeah, and the latest message comes from Guam Memorial Hospital medical staff. So I got an article that ran in the Post. GMHA medical staff oppose repeal of mandatory arbitration law. Dr. Dustin Prins, Prins, president of the medical staff at GMHA, wrote to Speaker Therese Terlahi, a main sponsor to the Pretrial Screening Act, which is her workaround from the Medical Malpractice Act, which is still, as far as I'm concerned, a little bit cumbersome. But anyhow, Prins wrote and said, urging her not to repeal the arbitration law because the medical staff believed it would lead to increased demand on GMH and a reduction in the number of specialists on Guam. Similar arguments about a reduction in the number of physicians on Guam should the arbitration law be repealed were presented during the 35th legislature when lawmakers were beginning to discuss the arbitration law, its impacts, and possible changes. Opponents of the current law say mandatory arbitration locks judicial access behind the costly out-of-court procedure. So the litigation is behind closed doors. Well, the legislature, only Joanne Brown would want to change that, right? Yeah, which may discourage claimants from moving forward with their cases. Under the proposed replacement, the Pretrial Screening Act, medical malpractice claims, either at Superior Court or District Court, are to go through a pretrial screening procedure. The case will initially be sealed and referred to a magistrate. If the magistrate finds appropriate care was not applied and the conduct alleged was a factor in causing damages to the claimant, the client will then set a monetary settlement claim value on the claim. This opinion will be sealed for 30 days, but the court can order the opinion sealed temporarily or permanently upon agreement by the parties if a trial is not pursued. Within the 30 days, either party can pursue trial in court. The parties can, anytime within the process, request that the proceedings be placed on hold while they enter mediation or arbitration. Government and Guam agencies, including the hospital, would still fall under the Claims Act even if Bill 112 becomes law. However, according to Prinz, GMHA relies on a variety of specialists outside the hospital, and GMHA medical staff believe that specialists will either relocate or reduce the scope of their practice and limit access to their clinics should the Pretrial Screening Act become law. For example, medical staff at GMHA treating children currently consult with physicians with adult medicine specialties, as Guam often lacks physicians with similar child specialties. But with the expanded liability under Bill 112-36, we doubt that adult specialists will be willing to continue to assist. This goes further with our unborn babies who may have to depend on community OB specialists for consultations, and management of high-risk pregnancies may become unavailable, Prinz said. The GMHA medical staff president also said the staff members believe Bill 112 would not deter frivolous claims against healthcare providers, but would create an open season for claims. However, he did not elaborate. It's unclear if the Speaker has received additional statements on Bill 112, either sharing similar concerns or expressing support for the proposal. A request for her office asking additional testimony were received, but such letters were not answered by press time. So I think we'll take a trip to Churchill Downs, and then we'll come back to Guam Memorial Hospital, and I suppose another Joe? No, it's Mary. All right.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Wrigley Field, Chicago, Illinois, the world's most beautiful ballpark. If you want to know who to attribute that remark to, look up P.K. Wrigley. So here we are talking about mandatory medical arbitration and David Lebowski. There's an old lawyer saying that hard cases make bad law. And for me, this is a hard case. I start out with a proposition as a lawyer that the courthouse doors should be open to everyone, just like the legislature's doors. Yeah, the court should be available to everyone. On the other hand, I know a little bit about medical malpractice. I know that there are big bucks involved because doctors, you have a hard time finding a more ideal defendant than a doctor. Someone with deep pockets and someone who operates in an arena where so often the blame falls on the doctor regardless of what the actual facts are. If someone dies during a doctor's care, you could have 20 angels swearing that the doctor did exactly what he should have. And a lot of people say, no, I blame the doctor. So there's even kind of a revenge aspect there. So there are people that oftentimes people will want to sue a doctor. Suing a doctor can be quite lucrative. Plaintiffs' lawyers take medical malpractice cases on a contingent fee. In other words, they take a percentage of whatever the judgment is that they're able to earn. If they lose, they don't get anything. So that's there. And I listen to these doctors, and I know that they'll all say that medical malpractice insurance is prohibitively expensive. And looking at it from another standpoint, I suspect that there aren't very many doctors practicing with viable practices in downtown Dubuque or Chattanooga or someplace like that are just aching to pack up and move to Guam. So I see that side of it. On the other hand, when you understand David Lebowski and his son Asher, the little 4-year-old, and what we've been told has actually happened, it's your empathy gland works overtime, and you'd like to set things up so that doesn't happen again. So I haven't quite decided how I'm going to rule on this yet because it is really a hard question. Maybe Mary can help me with this one. Can you help me, Mary?
Hi. Well, I had to chime in because I did go through reading of it only once and then only discovered later that they were actually deleting the medical malpractice mediation. So that's good to delete that part. And I mean, just off the top, just reading it once, it seems to be simpler. Both sides present their case to a magistrate judge, and then the judge is given a short period of time to make a decision. So it looks, just off the bat, it looks a much easier way to make an initial determination, but still have the option to go to trial.
Now, of course, what the medical professionals are looking for is something that's not easy. They're not looking. They're looking for something that's complicated and hard and expensive because it serves as an effective bar to the courthouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, having given that I had a son that I was trying to sue the medical entity, but lawyers won't even touch it unless you have a lot of money up front.
Yeah.
And then they'll tell you right off whether it's even suggested or even that you should even be bothered, because maybe even if you do win, the monies that you were trying to, I'm sorry, I don't have the words for it, but it's just not even going to cover for anything.
Uh-huh.
And so, having just read this once, I think it's an easier initial way to proceed to make a determination whether to go to trial. And then it does have a limitation there. Did you get to that, where if the case is small, within $20,000 or less, then they will send it to small claims court?
Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, Mary.
I don't know.
You can't try a medical malpractice case in small claims court. Certain things, antitrust, medical malpractice, patent law, just don't fit very well in small claims. But I appreciate you. I appreciate your viewpoint on the subject, Mary.
Well, I mean, I planned on reading it a lot more, but it hasn't been scheduled for public hearing or anything, and so I've kind of been laid back on this. This was introduced a long time ago, and I kept saying, sit down and look at it some more and get some discussion going. So I'm glad that it is coming up, but of course it's coming from the medical side, right? And it would be nice to get a group of us, if anybody wants to call me up, and we can have lunch and talk about this thing. But part of it too is it's good to hear from people who have a legal background. And there is a lawyer that was interested in my case way back, but he just told me up front, is given my son's condition, he said there was just really, it was pointless to proceed with suing. So anyway, I hope we'll get to talk about it some more next week, maybe as the interest increases amongst the public.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I put this on the calendar is that I tip my hat to citizens who don't just accept what comes along and say there's nothing I can do about it. So I want to praise David Lebowski for just not letting it go. That's what we need. That's what makes for a healthy community. And if you wanted to start up a group, Mary, you probably might want to consider searching out David Lebowski. He seems to have a lot of interest in this matter.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It shouldn't be hard to find his name someplace, right?
Right.
Google. Thank you, Bob.
Good talking to you, Mary.
Okay.
All right, David Lebowski. Anybody whose name ends in ski can't be all bad, right, Jose?
You are correct.
Yeah. You got that part down. Yeah. All right. We worked that out yesterday, didn't we? You're right, Bob.
Ingrained. You are right, Bob.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm on to Bavacqua versus the CNMI. This is Bavacqua's column from the 19th of May. He's got one coming up. It'll be in a hard copy tomorrow.
You said the 19th?
Yeah. A very propitious day. This is Bavacqua. We must aim for more than being a U.S. territory. And I label this Bavacqua versus CNMI. You can see why. Every territory of the U.S. is different in some ways, but similar in others. All are islands except in different oceans. All have non-voting delegates. All are U.S. citizens except for American Samoa, which we now thoroughly understand, where the people are nationals. Those from American Samoa and those with ties to American Samoa but living in the U.S. can sometimes be very different in their political outlet. In recent years, a lot of this difference has come down to U.S. citizenship. While the Samoan diaspora laments how being U.S. nationals has limited their opportunities, they don't have a shot at any American stuff like pro football or... right?
I've never heard of one.
Yeah.
Pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Film.
Those in American Samoa worry that citizenship might mean more federal interference and loss of rights at home. It's the easiest thing in the territory to imagine that improving our fortunes must always lie with being further included in the U.S. In Guam, we might see our own struggle over political rights as a slow sacman to eventual inclusion, but things are much trickier than that. Francisco Baza Leon Guerrero is a Guam historical figure who illustrates this point well. He was known as Mr. Organic Act and pushed hard for things like U.S. citizenship and a local government for Guam. Like many of his generation, he wanted something better for the Chamorro people, but there weren't many options. America held all the cards, and so the most obvious way to improve things was to be loyal, sometimes cautiously critical, but just hope that they open the doors a little more. From what I've heard about Kiko Suelo, he wasn't just mildly critical. He was a thorn in the side of the naval government from time to time. And by the way, I suppose he's going to have to be canceled along with Juan Pat and some of these other fellows that didn't go for self-determination, right? In the 1940s and 50s, leaders like Francisco Basilean Guerrero imagined Guam having home rule, but didn't think it. Now, how does he know this? You know, he's got that DeLorean out in his parking lot, and he zipped back to the 1950s and talked to Kiko Suelo, and that's how he knows this stuff. Leaders like FBLG imagined having home rule, but didn't think it possible to obtain any political status option outside the U.S. And I can imagine in 1950, there were all kinds of people on Guam who said, you know, we really should be independent. Yeah.
Nope.
I'll put this on the calendar for tomorrow. This is too good to let it go. All right. See you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another victim. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A ninth person has died of injuries suffered yesterday morning when a coworker opened fire on employees at a commuter rail yard in San Jose, California.
The shooting happened during a morning shift change, and officers arrived to find multiple victims in several buildings, including the gunman who appears to have killed himself. 57-year-old Sam Cassidy worked at the transit agency since 2012, but why he opened fire remains unknown.
Fox's Claudia Cowan, California's Governor Gavin Newsom reacting angrily.
What the hell's going on in the United States of America? The hell's wrong with us? And when are we going to come to grips with this? When are we going to put down our arms, literally and figuratively?
President Biden issuing a statement calling again on Congress to, as he put it, help end this epidemic of gun violence in America. 3 Texas police officers were shot last night in Flower Mound outside of Dallas. They'd responded to a home where a man was reportedly threatening to hurt himself when they were then fired upon. 2 of the officers were hospitalized, but they are reported to be in stable condition. The 3rd officer was treated at the scene. President Biden is giving the country's intelligence community 90 days to report on the origins of the coronavirus. The Senate has passed a resolution calling for the declassification of all government information on the start of the virus. It was co-sponsored by Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley.
They have done all kinds of assessments. They've done research. They've reached some conclusions, or at least they've got some ideas. I think the American people deserve to see that intelligence. I mean, why should we take Joe Biden's word for it? We ought to be able to see for ourselves, and that's what my legislation would do.
In light of the new investigation, Facebook says it has stopped banning posts suggesting the coronavirus was man-made. U.S. and Chinese trade envoys have spoken by phone for the first time since President Biden took office, neither side saying when actual negotiations on ending the tariff war might restart. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey, this is Trey Gowdy, host